Late 90s RTS ruled PC gaming. Legends like Command & Conquer and StarCraft defined the era. Big boxes, maps, and guides made every game feel special. But beyond the classics, hidden gems pushed the genre further. Today, let's explore 11 RTS games still worth playing. Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun arrived after a long wait, and fans expected something revolutionary. What they got instead was a game that stayed loyal to the classic Command & Conquer formula. And honestly, that's exactly why so many people still love it today. The game keeps the fast-paced RTS gameplay the series was known for, but adds a darker sci-fi atmosphere, improved visuals, and some incredibly memorable units. Battles feel chaotic in the best way possible. Explosions leave craters in the ground, bridges can be destroyed while enemy units are crossing them, and entire cities become battlefields filled with ambush opportunities. What really made Tiberian Sun stand out was the difference between the two factions. GDI focused on slow, heavy firepower with giant walkers like the Titan and the Mammoth Mach 2, while Nod relied on stealth, speed, underground attacks, and terrifying cyborg soldiers. The contrast made every match feel completely different depending on who you played. The campaign was another huge highlight. Westwood leaned hard into live-action storytelling, bringing back Kane and expanding the strange world of Tiberium with mutants, alien mysteries, and the mysterious Tacitus. Even today, the atmosphere feels unique compared to most modern RTS games. Sure, the game didn't reinvent the genre like StarCraft or Total Annihilation did. Some mechanics already felt familiar even back then. But Tiberian Sun succeeded because of its identity, its mood, and its incredibly satisfying gameplay loop. More than 2 decades later, it still feels like one of the most iconic sci-fi RTS games ever made. Homeworld is one of those RTS games that still feels ahead of its time. Released in 1999, it didn't just move strategy into space, it made space feel enormous, lonely, and beautiful. Instead of controlling tanks on a flat battlefield, you commanded entire fleets in full 3-dimensional combat, with fighters, corvettes, frigates, carriers, destroyers, and the massive mothership all moving through open space. What makes the classic Homeworld so special is not only the gameplay, but the atmosphere. The story follows a people trying to return to their lost homeworld after exile and destruction, and somehow, with simple cutscenes, voice acting, dramatic camera angles, and a powerful soundtrack, it becomes one of the most emotional stories ever told in an RTS. The battles still look incredible in motion. Fighters weave through enemy fire, capital ships trade, massive attacks, and every fleet encounter feels like a mix of ballet and fireworks. It can be complex at first, especially because movement happens on every axis, but once it clicks, there is nothing quite like it. The remastered collection made the game much easier to revisit today, with updated models, textures, effects, improved controls, and many refinements from Homeworld 2 brought back into the first game. It also includes the original classic versions, which is great for preservation. Sure, the pace is slower than most RTS games, and some missions can feel dated, but Homeworld still stands apart because of its scale, emotion, and identity. Even now, few strategy games have captured space warfare with this much elegance. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, few strategy games were as addictive and influential as Age of Empires 2. And unlike many classics from that era, this one still feels genuinely fun to play today. The original game, released in 1999, became legendary because of its perfect mix of city building, resource management, technological progression, and massive historical battles. Choosing a civilization, advancing through the ages, and slowly building an unstoppable empire created a gameplay loop that was incredibly hard to put down. What makes Age of Empires 2 even more impressive is how well it has survived the passage of time. The definitive edition modernized the classic without destroying its identity. The graphics were completely upgraded with sharper details, improved lighting, better animations, and more detailed environments, but it still instantly feels like the same Age of Empires 2 millions of players grew up with. This version also includes an enormous amount of content, bringing together the original campaigns, expansions, additional civilizations, and brand new missions. Whether you enjoy skirmishes against AI, online multiplayer, or story-driven historical campaigns, there is an absurd amount of content here. Of course, some elements still show the game's age. Large battles can become chaotic, and the unit AI is not as advanced as modern RTS games. But honestly, that almost feels like part of the charm. Because at its core, Age of Empires 2 remains one of the most important real-time strategy games ever made, and the definitive edition proves that a well-preserved classic can still stand proudly alongside modern strategy games today. Released in 1999, Warzone 2100 was one of those RTS games that tried to push the genre in a different direction. While most strategy games at the time focused heavily on resource gathering and base micromanagement, Warzone placed much more emphasis on combat, research, and customization. The game takes place after a global nuclear catastrophe, where the world has basically collapsed into chaos. You lead a faction called The Project, searching for lost technology while fighting rival groups across massive battlefields filled with tanks, cyborgs, hovercrafts, and aircraft. What made Warzone 2100 stand out was its unit design system. Instead of simply building pre-made tanks and vehicles, you could create your own machines by combining different chassis types, weapons, movement systems, and special abilities. That level of customization felt incredibly advanced for the time and gave battles a much more personal feeling. The classic version also impressed players with its fully 3D battlefields. Rolling hills, valleys, weather effects, explosions, and dynamic camera controls made the game feel far more modern than many RTS titles released around the same period. And unlike most strategy games back then, your army carried over between missions, meaning experienced units became genuinely valuable. Of course, the game had flaws. Pathfinding could be frustrating, some missions dragged on for too long, and the early campaign starts pretty slowly. But once the research tree expands and the battles become larger, Warzone 2100 becomes surprisingly addictive. Even today, it still feels unique because few RTS games mixed customization, persistence, and large-scale warfare quite like this one did. Total Annihilation was one of the few RTS games that genuinely felt revolutionary instead of just copying Command & Conquer or Warcraft. At first glance, it looked familiar: build a base, gather resources, create an army, destroy the enemy. But the deeper you played, the more you realize this game was built around strategy, balance, and large-scale warfare in a way most RTS games simply were not. One of the biggest differences was the resource system. Instead of constantly collecting materials with workers, Total Annihilation focused on managing energy and metal production efficiently. Building a massive army was easy. Keeping that army powered and functioning during battle was the real challenge. The game also featured an enormous variety of units, including tanks, mechs, aircraft, naval ships, artillery, and experimental weapons. But unlike many strategy games from that era, there was no overpowered ultimate unit. Every powerful machine came with serious weaknesses, forcing players to create balanced armies instead of spamming one strategy. What truly made the game stand out, though, was its scale and physics-driven battles. Explosions sent debris flying across the battlefield, forests could catch fire, units gained experience over time, and the fully 3D terrain completely changed combat tactics. Higher ground mattered, positioning mattered, planning mattered. Even today, Total Annihilation still feels surprisingly modern in some ways. Many large-scale RTS games that came later clearly borrowed ideas from it. Sure, some elements aged poorly, especially the interface and pathfinding, but the core gameplay remains incredibly satisfying. For many RTS fans, Total Annihilation wasn't just another strategy game from the 90s. It was one of the first games that truly made battles feel massive, chaotic, and tactical at the same time. Earth 2150 was one of the most unique RTS franchises of the late 90s and early 2000s because it wasn't really about conquering the world, it was about escaping it before humanity went extinct. The game's story takes place after a nuclear war literally knocks Earth out of orbit, slowly pushing the planet toward the Sunday. Instead of the usual save the world setup, every faction is desperately trying to gather enough resources to abandon Earth before time runs out. Even today, that premise still feels surprisingly creative for a strategy game. What made Earth 2150 stand out was how much freedom it gave the player. Instead of relying only on pre-made tanks and units, you could design your own vehicles by combining different chassis, weapons, armor, shields, and special equipment. You could create heavily armored war machines, stealth attackers, repair units with weapons, or fast hovercraft built specifically for hit-and-run tactics. The game also pushed strategy further than many RTS games of its era. Ammunition was limited, resources on maps were finite, weather affected visibility, and even turning your vehicle lights off during storms could help you sneak into enemy bases unnoticed. You could also tunnel underground, steal enemy vehicles, and carry units and resources across missions, making every decision feel important. Visually, the game still has a very distinctive atmosphere. Massive valleys, storms, fog, explosions, lasers, and futuristic military designs gave battles a dark sci-fi feeling that helped separate it from Command & Conquer or StarCraft. Of course, the series definitely shows its age today. Pathfinding issues, clunky menus, and some repetitive missions can be frustrating. But underneath those flaws is one of the most ambitious RTS games of its generation, filled with ideas that still feel fresh decades later. Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds is basically what would happen if Age of Empires 2 and Star Wars were merged into the same game. And somehow, that combination worked surprisingly well. Released in 2001, the game takes the classic Age of Empires formula, gathering resources, building bases, researching technology, and creating armies, and replaces medieval kingdoms with stormtroopers, battle droids, Jedi, Wookiees, and massive Star Wars vehicles. At first, it sounds strange. You still collect food and resources like a traditional RTS, except now you're building futuristic armies instead of knights and archers. But the Star Wars atmosphere makes everything feel fresh and incredibly fun. What really helped the game stand out was how faithfully it used the license. The campaigns take players across iconic locations like Hoth, Yavin, and Naboo, while also exploring stories beyond the movies. You can command Darth Vader, lead rebel attacks, control the Empire, or fight as the Wookiees in large-scale battles that genuinely feel like Star Wars. The factions also play differently enough to keep matches interesting. The Empire focuses on heavy machinery and walkers, while other factions rely more on speed, air units, or swarm tactics. Sure, the game shows its age today. Animations are stiff, pathfinding can be messy, and visually it looks very early 2000s. But underneath those flaws is still one of the most charming and addictive Star Wars RTS games ever made. Cossacks European Wars was one of the most ambitious historical RTS games of its generation. Instead of focusing on small armies and quick skirmishes, the game aimed to recreate the massive scale of European warfare between the 16th and 18th centuries. You could command enormous armies from nations like France, England, Russia, Turkey, Spain, and Prussia, with gigantic infantry formations, cavalry charges, artillery bombardments, and naval battles happening all at once across huge maps. One of the game's biggest highlights was scale. Cossacks allowed thousands of units on screen simultaneously, something that felt absolutely insane at the time. Watching giant lines of musketeers firing volleys while cannons exploded in the background created battles that genuinely felt massive. The gameplay also pushed resource management much further than many RTS games of that era. Troops constantly consumed food, muskets required coal and iron to fire, and maintaining a huge military became just as important as building one. The amount of variety was also impressive. 16 playable nations, hundreds of technologies, and unique military strengths gave each faction a different playstyle. Some focused on heavy artillery, others relied on cavalry or overwhelming infantry tactics. Even today, the colorful 2D visuals and gigantic battles still have a lot of charm. Sure, pathfinding issues and chaotic unit control can sometimes be frustrating, but Cossacks remains one of the few RTS games that truly captured the feeling of commanding a massive historical army. Submarine Titans was one of the strangest RTS games of its era, and honestly, that's exactly what made it memorable. Instead of fighting across medieval kingdoms or futuristic planets, the entire game takes place underwater after a global catastrophe destroys most of Earth's surface. Humanity is forced beneath the ocean, where massive factions battle for survival, while an alien race hidden inside a comet enters the conflict. The core gameplay follows the classic RTS formula. Gather resources, build bases, produce units, and destroy enemy forces. But the underwater setting gave the game a very different atmosphere compared to other strategy games at the time. One of the coolest mechanics was the depth system. Submarines could move between different underwater layers, allowing ambushes, sneak attacks, and hidden assaults from below enemy defenses. It added a unique tactical element that most RTS games simply didn't have. The game also included a surprisingly useful automation system. You could assign AI assistants to manage resources, repairs, or defenses for you, which reduced a lot of the tedious micromanagement and let players focus more on combat. Visually, Submarine Titans had a lot of charm too. Different ocean environments, underwater lighting, sea creatures, bubbles, and rotating maps helped make the world feel surprisingly immersive for an RTS released in 2000. Of course, the game definitely had problems. Unit variety was limited, missions could become repetitive, and the biggest issue by far was technical instability, with frequent crashes frustrating many players. Still, despite its flaws, Submarine Titans remains one of the most creative underwater RTS games ever made, and even today it feels refreshingly different from most strategy games of its era. Released in 1997, Crush, Kill and Destroy, better known as KKND, was one of the more unique post-apocalyptic RTS games of the late 90s. While it clearly took inspiration from Command & Conquer, it mixed that formula with a strange Mad Max-style world filled with mutants, armored vehicles, and bizarre creatures. The story takes place after a global war destroys civilization, leaving two factions fighting for survival. The survivors rely on technology, tanks, and heavy machinery, while the evolved use mutated beasts and biological weapons. That contrast gave the game a lot of personality. One minute you're fighting armored trucks, the next you're being attacked by giant acid-spitting scorpions or missile-launching crabs. Gameplay follows the classic RTS structure: gather oil resources, build bases, create armies, and destroy enemy forces. But KKND added a few interesting mechanics, especially units gaining experience over time and becoming stronger after surviving battles. The game could also be surprisingly difficult. Enemy AI attacked aggressively, often targeting weak points in your defenses and launching attacks from multiple directions. Of course, the game had flaws. Controls felt clunky at times, scrolling across the map was slow, and many units played similarly despite their different designs. Still, KKND managed to stand out because of its strange atmosphere, weird unit designs, and chaotic wasteland setting, making it one of the more memorable RTS games of its era. These RTS classics may be decades old, but they still prove why the genre became legendary in the first place. Massive battles, unforgettable soundtracks, deep strategy, and pure nostalgia. If you grew up with these games, let me know your favorite in the comments. And if I missed one, tell me what deserves a spot in part 2.